Hi, welcome to the show. Today, the topic is something that I've been thinking about for a couple of days, and I actually made an audio recording while I was driving my truck to kind of remember the topic. I've been struggling a lot lately with motivation, with purpose, with direction, and I thought I'd share it with you because I assume that many of you face the same kind of challenge moments in your life, and you might gain something from hearing my story. Years ago, when I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s, um, I had an interest in, I'd always had an interest in world affairs, politics, economics, all these kind of things. And I actually went to law school. And growing out of these, I actually sat up in bed one day and had sort of a epiphany and knew that I had to write it down. And that epiphany became a book that I published, self published, and actually sold 100 and some copies. I mean, mostly in New Zealand, of all places. I don't know why. But it was a big seller in New Zealand, so famous there, I guess. The book was about the future. And specifically, it was a prediction of what the future might look like. By the time I finished the book, it was 1999. Give you time frame. I'm doing this program right now in 2022, so that was 23 years ago. And in the book, basically, I talked about. I tried to describe the world as I projected it what it might be after certain huge technological influences like the internet at the time, which was the craze. The .com stuff was really big back then, I think, and life extension technologies were huge ideas were being mentioned. I didn't go into AI, which some people are really like to talk about these days. But basically, I kind of discussed the book actually started by describing some of the problems that our world was facing. And I actually predicted some things. I predicted just digital currency or cyber cryptocurrency. I called it cyber bucks. And there's other things I predicted that nothing has ever come of them. But that's why when I saw cryptocurrencies start to happen, and when I could figure out how to get them, when you didn't have to be a complete computer nerd in order to figure out how to buy them, I grabbed as much as I could. And my kids too, for my kids. And as a result, they've done pretty well with their savings from childhood. But I did that because I saw something in the future, and I realized that the, the policies that governments were following would eventually cause them to economically collapse, and that they would have to completely reform the way they see the world, the way they behave in the world, and begin catering more to us as citizens rather than us being their servants, or and that was part of it. I also saw the power and the potential of being what I guess I called a world citizen. And I had big hopes and big plans for success. I had always, since I was young, I had always thought in terms of being very successful. I remember thinking when I was young, I better not do that. It wouldn't be good when they do my biography. You know, that's the kind of crap I would think about when I was a kid. So I always thought I was going to be someone important. I think I had a little Lord Fauntleroy complex, which has bad aspects too. And I actually did well. And in my early 20s, I found myself with a shitload of money compared to other people my age, which basically who had nothing. When I was in law school, I didn't have to work because I had a lot of money. And I had a business that made some money, and then it started declining, and then I bought another business that I hoped would make some money, but I figured I'd get rid of it if it didn't. And then I got into the real estate development business, and I got married, and I had 4 kids, bam, 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 really fast. And I got married for the wrong reasons. I think I got married because I was tired of being alone. I was tired of dating. I had moved to a rural area to try to find some connection to my roots because I had lived in suburbia and felt no connection. I felt disconnected. And so I was desperately trying to find some kind of connection to something that felt solid and real and a part of me. So I moved to a rural area. I built a house that started out as a cabin and turned into a palatial palace that cost me twice what I had budgeted for it. I spent every dime I had and then borrowed a bunch more. And still, I was able to pay it off within a few years. So I did really well in those days. Later on, I, along with my then wife, began dabbling in real estate development and buying land, building houses, flipping houses. And we made a lot of money. The real estate market was going up like crazy. And the way the tax was restructured in those days, a husband and wife could shelter up to 500,000 in gain for each property that they, sold if they lived in it at least 2 years. So we were building houses, living in them in 2 years, and then selling them and making great gain. We were maybe 1 or 2 houses away from retirement, and I was in my early 40s, or around 40. Yeah. Then 2008 hit. 2007, 2008, the crash. And everything changed. Everything. Right around that time, since we were doing so well, we had another business that was making some money, but we had somebody running it, and we didn't pay that much attention to it, to be honest. It was a side income. And we decided to be adventurous. We went out and bought an RV. Now, we did borrow that money from my parents. We bought a motor home, but we got it for half price because it was right after 2008 when everything was crashing and the manufacturer went out of business. And then we went to a dealer that bought out the last of that inventory and got it for half price. And right now, to this day, that same motorhome is worth just a little less than what we paid for it originally, which is amazing because usually these things depreciate like crazy. But so we were smart. But anyway, we bought the motorhome. We took our 4 little kitties and climbed in, and we started traveling. And we ended up traveling around North America twice. We spent 2 years on the road, did 2 circumnavigations of North America. And by North America, I mean Anglo-North America, the U.S. and Canada. We didn't do Mexico, though we talked about it, or Central America. But we had a great time. But while all this was going on, the business that I had purchased originally was my dad's. And some of that was my dad's wanting me to take over his business, which I never wanted to do. And finally, after trying to help him sell it 3 times and he walking away from the last buyer, who I thought certainly he would take the deal, I already knew the numbers. I knew everything. I said, crap, I'll buy the damn thing because I know I can do this without losing too much money, and I might even make some money. And I don't care one way or the other. He's ready to retire, so let him retire. And I bought it, immediately got sucked into a whirlwind, found myself $700,000 in debt almost instantly, and then spent the next 3 years trying to recover that. Most of the money came from a small operation that was running in the back room. And at the end, I ended up closing everything except that small little operation. And around 2000, I moved it down to where I had moved to the country and where I wanted to raise my kids. I was starting to have. Anyway, when '08 hit, we had just started out on our journey. So we weren't too worried. We knew it was a big crash. Crashes happen. It'll bounce back. Yeah, real estate's crashed. Okay, so we'll sit on it a little longer. It always comes back. It always did. And it never did. Over time, as we waited, the little business wasn't producing much, and we weren't gaining from the real estate, so we didn't have any money. And we had borrowed money. We had built a house, of course, and we had lived in it for 2 years. We put it on the market, and then we borrowed some money and invested our own to build a really big house, which was going to be one of our big. We were going to really hit it out of the ballpark. We invested ultimately about $1 million in this property, and when we finished the house, the realtors projected the sale at about 1.6 million. So we were going to make a $600,000 profit, plus we were going to get our $1 million out. We didn't have much debt, so that was going to be a giant chunk of cash landing in our lap. We figured one or more projects, and we would be able to retire. My target was 2.5 million. And then I was just going to start investing. And I was looking, this stuff I wrote about in my book, I was looking overseas. I was looking at what should we do? I mean, I didn't like the direction the country seemed to be going. I didn't like the negativity. I wanted my kids to grow up in a place where people were optimistic, not a place that was in decline. In my book, I talked about a country in decline, a world that was in decline because the industrial age was in decline. But I also talked about how there was a new future that was exciting and it was coming. And I wanted my kids to think in terms of the new future because that's the future they were going to be building, not being a part of this dying industrial age, which was just a history footnote from their standpoint. And so I hope maybe, but I realized as I did my research, we might need a different citizenship because I had done calculations that it costs you about over $1 million in a lifetime. I think that's what the number was. Your taxes due. And that if you didn't have to pay your regular taxes, if you were someplace where you even made less money, but you didn't have the tax burden that we have in most of the industrialized countries, that when you were finished, when you retired at 65, which nobody does, you'd have about $1 million extra in your bank as a result of average compounding and that sort of thing. And that's your retirement money right there. There's your Social Security, and you could invest that, and it would continue to grow. So that's what I wanted to do. And I went so far as setting up an offshore trust with expert lawyers, spent a lot of money on that, which my wife was very dubious about. Actually sent a lot of money to an attorney to get us ultimately Canadian citizenship. Canada is not a good place for taxes, but the advantage of a Canadian citizenship, as by our calculation, was not in living there. You'd live there a little while until you got the citizenship, and then you'd leave. Because I was thinking long term. I was thinking about the accrual of wealth and the accrued effect over time of tax burden. So I was thinking after about 3 to 5 years, we'd leave Canada. We were already on the road for 2 years. What difference did it make? By '08, and we would then go to live in the Caribbean, or we'd live in a couple of different countries, and we'd use the Five Flags theory, if you're familiar with that, or PT, or perpetual tourist kind of concept. Maybe live in Panama or Costa Rica, and I had been to Costa Rica 5 times and loved the place, and I thought we could live there. We could live in Panama, which is very similar. We could live on an island. We also looked at getting Turks and Caicos citizenship because at that time it was seen as a backdoor way to get a British citizenship. These are both tier 1 citizenships, Canada or Britain, and the advantage to them is they don't tax you if you don't live there. So basically the ideal is to have their passport but not actually live in those countries. And that's what I was looking at. And I just thought that I'd spend the rest of my days as a parent and as a spouse living a very good life, traveling, living in different countries, teaching my children how to be world citizens, teaching them how to make and build wealth so that they would have a great life and have excellent opportunities. They would have a big view of the world. And when they made decisions, they wouldn't think small. They wouldn't think, oh, I can only go to this particular school, or I can only handle, they would think globally in terms of who they associated with and what the potential was for their life. These are my visions, my ideas. And when '08 hit, and after the impact of '08, the crash started to sink in, and after we'd been on the road for 2 years, and I started to see my kids were starting to get bored, and they were showing this lack of socialization with other kids. They were showing that was affecting them, and even more than that, another hope that I had is that, as I said before, that I got married for the wrong reasons, and there was always something wrong in my marriage, and I knew it when we started counseling almost immediately, and I didn't know what it was, and I read a million books, and I got us to go to therapy. In fact, I remember one of my birthdays, my then wife said, "I got, your birthday present is we'll go to couples therapy." That shows you where the interest was in that. And we did, and we went a couple times, and then she stopped going, and I just kept going, and I never stopped. I stayed in therapy, and then later on, I got a coach, and I've been talking to that coach once a week ever since. So I believe strongly in we need help. We need people that know what they're doing to listen to us and help bounce our thoughts off of and to catch us when we're screwing up. But by the time we came back from that trip, it had become painfully clear to me, and I've been told this by our therapist, that there was no hope for our marriage, that my spouse was likely autistic, that she was not capable of real intimacy. She admitted to me that she figured out that she must be asexual, what they call asexual nowadays, and not interested in sex, not really interested in romance, so aromantic. And I chose her, I think, because she was safe and she wouldn't get me into trouble. That's why I chose her. And she didn't get me into trouble, and she was fairly safe. She didn't challenge me, and she didn't smother me as the way my mom did. We all react to the crap that we bring from our childhood. So I was really kind of depressed, and I can feel it right now in my muscles as I describe this, as I talk about this, the letdown, the depressed, the hopeless feeling. Because remember, I was the one that stayed in therapy. I was the one that bought all the books. I was absolutely determined to make that marriage work, to try to make it work, because it would be so beautiful. I didn't want anybody else. I wanted to be with one person. And I wanted to be happy, and I wanted to have my needs met, whatever those were. I didn't even know. I was a very, very late bloomer. I was a virgin when I was 27, and that was insane. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't religious. It was incredible shyness and being backward, and depression. That just went on and on. And even then, it wasn't anything special. It was just I went out with somebody I wasn't even attracted to. It's a pattern line. Just because I wanted to get it over, I wanted to break that cherry, I guess, and just discover life and get out there. I had a lot of anxiety around social anxiety. I still do. It's not obvious when I'm out amongst people. It kind of seems to go away when I'm amongst people, but it's actually, it pulls a lot of energy out of me. And later on, I'll be exhausted. And the next day, I'll sleep half the day after a heavy social, calendar. It just drains me. Anyway, I'm giving all this background and this story because, and that what I really want to talk about is what came after that. Remember, I started off by talking about purpose and lack of motivation. After the fallout from 2008, it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to sell our properties. We ended up being stuck with both houses until 2021, when one of them finally sold. We tried over and over. In the particular little tiny market we were in, we just couldn't sell high-end properties. They were beautiful, but we couldn't sell them to anyone at any price. And it ultimately took people coming in from another part of the country who had money to buy one of them, and the other one we're still waiting to find a buyer. during the time, those years immediately after '08, after we came back from our trip, the kids go back into schools. The relationship, I realize, is over. I'm feeling negative and depressed. But we had to hunker down, and we had to take that business that had kind of died, and we ended up having to fire the guy we had that was running it. And I hired my spouse and gave her half the business, to take over, because I figured she needed something to do. I mean, she had been a full-time mom, but the kids were now mostly grown. And I remember reading somewhere, you don't want, if you have she used to be in corporate America, and I figured I don't want her being an executive bossing me around, so maybe I'll get her in the business. And besides, I didn't want to run it. I have no interest in running the business. That's not what I do. I find good investments and try to make the most out of them. So I put her in charge of that, and plus she also took over a small Montessori school when we got back. This just shows you what she's like. That our kids had gone to before we left, and it was going out of business. I mean, it was about to go under, and she grabbed it and took over for free as their executive director and turned the entire school around. Now it's extremely successful. So she did a hell of a job there. Previous director, who was being paid, just walked out, harumph, and left the place to collapse. A professional. Anyway, so I was very proud of my spouse for doing that. But once again, desperately, we were trying to figure out how to make this business, turn this business around and make enough money, because keep in mind, in the past, that this business was only supplemental to our income. It didn't support us. Suddenly now, real estate was producing no income. We were continuing to borrow money against the equity we had in this real estate just to pay our bills. And at first we had borrowed a lot because we had established a lifestyle, and we assumed that everything was going to keep going as it had, continuing to go up, and it would come back. And all the standard stuff says, oh, your real estate always grows, blah, blah, blah. You can count on this and that. Well, no. I should have known better from my own writings and stuff, but still, I only half believe what I wrote. Because no matter what I said, things tended to keep going on as they always had. So we struggled for years, and it was a business that we had emotionally disconnected from. It was not something that either of us had any personal interest in, and yet it was the best opportunity that we had to try to make money as quickly as possible, and to make substantial money so that we could even begin to service the debt that we had started to build, while we tried to sell the real estate. In the meantime, the real estate, needed maintenance and expenses, and it was expensive to keep. And so we ended up living in one of the houses and stayed in it, and I raised all my kids in it. And it turned out to be a wonderful place, actually extremely nice home, because we built it top of the line. It ended up being a great place to raise a large family, because we had 4 children. And a nice, peaceful neighborhood. So it wasn't horrible, but the business took forever to grow, and we had setbacks. And as soon as we thought we were there, it would have another setback, and it would take what we thought should take 3 months took 4 or 5 years. And here we are in 2021, 2022 now, and the business is finally, maybe, taking off, based on a business model that I came up with 7-8 years ago, a revised business model. And it's just now happening. I mean, it just took that long to get people to agree to things, to set up relationships, to negotiate with people, to begin the process of marketing products, and then the long lead time. We sell things to the federal government, and they take forever. So you start selling something, and 6-7 years later, they finally buy it. So everything takes forever. In the meantime, I'm getting older. I mean, I lost my life. I'm 58. I'll be 58 next month. And, I started this stuff before I was 40. And during that whole time period, I watched I spent a lot of my life after that trip we took. Ever since we hit, I had to accept that my marriage was over. I didn't leave the marriage because there was no point. I was doing therapy, and then I was doing training with my coach, and I realized that I wasn't ready for a relationship. Why did I pick the woman I did? And if I went out and tried to pick someone else, I'd probably make the same mistake. And I saw other men doing that. They're dumping their wives and getting someone else, and then they were unhappy later on because they were looking for that person to fix them, or that's not how it works. So I knew I had to be fixed before I would be any good, or before I would know even what I wanted. I'm still technically married. We're separated. We've been, quote, separated for about 4 years. Now she has her own home. Finally, this past year, she bought a home. But we stayed in this house even when we weren't sleeping together. We lived on different floors. We stayed in the big house that we had built because it was so big and roomy, and we could not afford to keep separate homes. We had to service the debt, and we had to make a lot of money just to do that. And plus, the business itself took a lot of money just to run. All this and doing something that I had no desire to do, no joy in it, no fun. And when you work for decades to service debt instead of building a future, and of course, remember all the stuff about going overseas and becoming a Canadian citizen, living in the Caribbean. You haven't heard anything about that, have you? That was a whole thing for me. I wrote a book about this stuff. It disappeared because I don't have any money. I spent my life preparing to be someone who had money and influence, and maybe I thought about going into serious politics and stuff like that, and instead I didn't do anything except try to rebuild a business that I hated and try to pay the bills and take care of my kids. One thing I did was I made sure that I could spend as much possible time with my kids. I wanted to at least do something well, and I tried to be a great dad. Was I? I don't know. People said I was. They still have their struggles and challenges. My youngest turns 18 in a week, I think. I'm trying to think what day it is, but very soon. 2 of my kids actually have birthdays in about a week. And then so I don't have any minor kids anymore. But I at least was able to spend a lot of time in person with them. But I didn't have any personal direction beyond that. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't building anything. I tend to be the kind of person that totally focuses on doing one thing rather than having lots of irons in the fire. And my focus was just on, quote, raising my kids, which isn't really a focus, is it? My spouse was working full time in that business and with her school, and didn't spend nearly as much time with the kids as I did. And they ended up being closer to me, but they needed me because she did not have the emotional capacity. I was afraid with her autism that might cause scarring and damage to them, because to have a parent that doesn't have deep emotional capacity can cause damage to children, and especially a mom. So I wanted to try to be the mom too. And so that's kind of why I was also there, was to try to be the emotional person for them. But they've told me later that I wasn't a very good emotional person for them. So I don't know. So I was able to negotiate a good business agreement with my spouse so that our ownership and, we have a clear shareholders agreement, just like a partnership agreement. We don't have a settlement agreement, but we easily could have one. We have a one outlined, and it's pretty straightforward. We don't have any minor children now. We won't in a few days. And the business is our only real asset in the house, and we both agreed to sell the house. And so there's really nothing to argue over. We don't have outside income to speak of, and we don't have huge, IRAs or stuff like that. So it's not much to argue over, and I'm about ready to go ahead and get a divorce. One of the reasons we haven't is because it makes it easier for our taxes with the business and all, and for our health insurance to be. And I haven't had any reason. I haven't had anybody else, And she has had several not live in, she's had several boyfriends, and I've had a few people I've dated. And she now is living with my ex brother in law, and who's always been a good friend of mine. He was the best man at our wedding. And that's kind of weird. But I like him, and I think they're good for each other, I think. So, but it's still weird. It just feels weird. But I support it, but it feels weird. So anyway, here I am, basically settled with my spouse. The business is finally producing to the point where it should support us. We've just had a huge financial crisis because there was a new opportunity that we went after, and my spouse borrowed money and took all of our cash and threw it into this opportunity, expecting that we were going to be paid for something else, and that was going to take care of the cash. And we ended up in a huge cash crunch. So right now I'm eating bananas and stuff this month, hoping to not starve. So it was a very unsettling feeling, but it's a temporary thing. We should be doing okay financially eventually. So I'm free to have a real relationship with someone I actually have a connection to with, which is something I've never really had. Ever. Not even with parents. Which is something I learned in therapy. I don't really have an identity because I was raised sort of with emotional incest. Not real incest, but emotional incest, and something else. You can look it up. And to the point where my parents, especially my mom, was so dominating that I didn't really develop my own identity, and so I've never really known who the hell I am, or what I want, or what I love, or what I like, or I don't know. It's like a big blank when I think I've always been focused on other people, taking care of them, doing what they need, giving them what they want, and I derived my self-worth out of satisfying them, like a caretaker. And but that doesn't make me happy. So but because I don't know who I am, in a sense, I don't know what I like, what I love. I am, pardon the beeps if you hear that. Um, I am kind of stymied. I don't really know what to do next. I would like to develop I love having a free lifestyle. I love having a lifestyle where I can go where I want to go whenever I want. I also like to have money. So I want to make a decent amount of money. So I have the freedom to fly places, to do things that I want to do. But I don't actually live a high lifestyle. Always wanted a Jeep. I had one when I was young, and I've never had one since. I've been driving used cars for years. And I'll buy a used Jeep, but I'd like to have a Jeep. There's little things I'd like to have, but beyond that, I don't really have much material interests. So I've found myself at a crossroads, at a point of departure, really, not a crossroads, where the future ahead of me is a blank. I've been on a railroad doing chugging along, trying to make stuff work, trying to rescue situations, trying to deal with crises. A railroad I hated, frankly, in a relationship that was completely unsatisfying. And yet I was able to get out of it peacefully and keep a business partner. And that's quite an achievement. That was a hell of a lot of work. And look how long it took. Tomorrow I'm scheduled to go to my 30th law school reunion. I practiced law a little after I graduated, but that was about it. And I didn't stay in the city where I went to law school, so I haven't seen these people in 30 years. I have no idea whether I'm going to get anything out of it, but I'm trying to force myself, even though I have a lot of social anxiety, to go to see them. Maybe I'll see somebody. Maybe I'll remember somebody. Maybe I'll have a smile, a laugh. Maybe I'll make a connection. Maybe I'll meet a cute chick or whatever, a cute young woman or old woman. I don't know. I have to force myself to do stuff like that. And that's what I've been doing with the help of my coach, is forcing myself to do things, to go to social things, to physically exercise so I take care of my body, to eat healthier foods for me, take supplements and things that are good for me. But my challenge is that I'm sitting on the edge of this, you could call it an abyss, a big, dark future. It could be an abyss. I literally could push myself off the edge and fall into a deep, dark hell. Logic tells me that's not what's going to happen. It's just going to be another step forward, and that you just have to take one step and then take the next step and then take the next step and have faith that there's going to be a floor when you put your foot out. But I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know what I want, and I don't really know who I am. And that leaves me flat. I had that drive, I had a direction, I thought I knew what I was going to do, at least in terms of how I was going to live my life. I mean, living overseas and traveling and avoiding paying lots of taxes in and of itself is not a life. It's just a way to structure your life. But I still didn't know even then what I would be doing with my time, what my real interests were. I still don't. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, because nobody ever asked me that question when I was a kid. They told me who I was going to be when I grew up. And they really weren't interested in what I wanted to do. It didn't matter. It was not a factor to be considered. In fact, no one asked me, what do you really want to do when you grow up, Bill? At least no one that mattered. No one seriously. And if somebody had, and I had answered something genuine, there's a good chance I would have gotten an answer, what do you want to do that for? That's nothing. Or that's not going to amount to anything. No, you don't. Or I literally get from my mother, no, you don't want to do that. What you want to do is, and fill in the blank. That's how I was raised, and that's hard to get out of you. So I'm still lacking. I don't have motivation because I don't have desire. I don't have desire because I don't have an object for my desire. I look ahead, and normally I imagine there being a light that you head towards, and that's what you're pursuing, and that's what drives you, is the desire to reach that goal. And I don't have a light to head towards. I don't have any light at all. And more than once, my attitude towards death is that if I died tomorrow, it really doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me at all. If I would just die, I don't care. This has not been a fun life. I would worry about, my kids being upset. But, they'd get over it. I don't know how important I am to them. They don't call me. One does sometimes. So, if I were to die, it would actually be easier. It's kind of a relief. I don't want to be suffering. I certainly don't want to be in a wheelchair or some shit where I'm struggling after being hurt. That would be terrible. I just watched my sister die way before her time. And she had cancer, and then she had a massive heart attack. But she did not take care of herself. She did not treat her cancer. She chose to die. She just didn't tell anyone, didn't take her medication, didn't go to her doctors, and died. She did not want to live. She had lost interest in life. And she really wasn't a nice person until she knew she was going to die. And then she actually became a decent person. Then she was okay, at peace. We were glad she was at peace. It made it easier for us, of course, selfishly speaking. But I kind of get it. I sound lazy, but I've had moments in my life where I've had these flashes of I don't know if they were, I wouldn't say it's flashes of inspiration. I've had these moments where I was dazzling and I dazzled the people around me and I could see it in their eyes. When I did things that amazed people, I have a lot of abilities. And when those things happen, my attitude is always the same. Of course, I can do that. That's no big deal. And I know it's a big deal and it feels good that I can do it. But these were always only little teeny moments in life, and they never seem to come back. And there was never seemed to be a moment when someone somewhere saw me in those moments and said, "Hey, you, I've got just the job for you." I always hoped for that. I always hoped somebody somewhere would see me in one of my best moments and recognize that I had a particular talent that was uniquely suited to something that I could do and that I might love. But no one has ever done that. That's a passive approach, I know. But from an active standpoint, I've never been able to figure out what I'm suited for. I have a son whose personality is similar to mine, and I don't know what to do with him. I mean, he's somewhat autistic, like his mom, and he probably will stay home until he's 50 if we don't do anything. He's living in his mom's house. And he's turning 20 in a few days. Great kid. He's a nice person. He has to be pushed into everything. He's taking college classes now, and he's doing well. But I have no idea what kind of career to push him towards, or how to get him to do it. Except, we might just have to make him do it. You just sort of sign him. That's what we've done in college. Just sign him up and he shows up. But I don't know. Maybe intelligence work. He's got a lot of, analyst abilities. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about how where I find myself at this moment in time without motivation to move forward, and how I had a whole direction in life that was made meaningless. And, in the real estate business, me and my then wife had built a lot of expertise in a particular marketplace and had studied markets, studied details. We learned a lot of stuff. We had a lot of data, a lot of knowledge that we spent years building. It's all garbage now. I mean, the crash destroyed it. So much of life was spent on things that are paper in the wind. So what do I do now? Which raises the question, what do I want to do now? That's the problem. Part of me just wants to die because it would be easier to start over. Because it's so fucking boring. And I'm so goddamn tired of performing in the business to look like how I'm supposed to make it work well when I have to do roles. Performing for my elderly parents to keep them happy. Performing as a parent for my kids. I spend tons of time flipping through dating sites, talking to women, but almost no one gets my attention. I don't know if it's just because I'm not seeing the right people or if I'm not in the right mindset. I don't know. So anyway, that's where I am, and I wanted to document it. I wanted to talk to you about it so that maybe you may have similar experiences. Maybe you may have found yourself having experienced something like this. Maybe you may have found yourself in the past or may now be in a similar place where I am, where you're on the verge of a new life, but don't know where you're going, or like me, don't have the motivation to start. In a lot of ways, I feel tired and burned out from pushing myself for so long to do things that I had no desire to do. And the willpower is limited, and after a while, you burn yourself out. And I'm burned out. I burned out of that business a long time ago. My willpower burned out a long time ago. I'm not 25, and I can feel it. And I have no desire to go willpowering into something else that I don't want anything to do with. So unless I know that it's something I want, I'm not going to bother. So here I sit. And it feels like death. Anyway, living death. Just sitting. So I go out and do things, but I'm like a walking ghost. This may sound like depression, maybe a little bit of it is, but I take medication and have for many years, and I feel like just increasing my medication is not really going to solve the problem. I think this is not clinical. This is real. This is a real challenge, a life challenge. It's the decision about how I want to live and what's going to motivate me. I don't want to numb myself. I want to see where this goes. So, anyway, that's all I have to say for now. And I'd love to hear what you think. And I hope this has helped somebody. And I hope it maybe will help people in the future. So, with that, I'll see you later.